More than half of this country, 26 states, are fighting extreme weather at this very hour. Wind gusts up to 75 miles per hour are forecast to tear through the Midwest tomorrow. And out west, some spots are running 35 degrees below average for early July, which means the exact same country is baking in one region and shivering in another today. 3 completely different weather stories are unfolding at once, which means none of them are minor. Folks, this is one of the stranger coast-to-coast setups we have covered in a while. We are going to walk you through the heat, the storms, and that strange cold out west. First, let's talk about the heat, since it affects more people than anything else today. A massive dome of high pressure is not weakening, which means it is only getting stronger. That dome is expanding across the middle and eastern half of this entire country today, which means the ridge responsible for this heat is only tightening its grip on the country. Actual air temperatures are running in the low 90s to around 100 degrees in spots, which means the heat index, how it actually feels outside, climbs even higher than that number. Heat index values are forecast to reach 105 to 115 degrees today, which means that kind of heat index is already showing up in Chicago, Detroit, and Indianapolis. It does not stop there either, since that same heat is pushing hard into the East Coast, which means New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. all feel triple-digit heat indices today. Columbus, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Richmond all sit inside that same dangerous heat corridor today, which means the entire stretch from the Great Lakes to the Chesapeake Bay shares this same risk. Frank, a retired teacher down in Springfield, Illinois, has felt plenty of hot summers before. Frank says this one already feels different since the air barely moves even after sunset, which means even simple chores outside can turn dangerous faster than most people would expect. No joke. Which means he started checking on 2 older neighbors every single afternoon these coming days. He says the trick is checking twice a day, not once, since conditions can shift by afternoon. An extreme heat warning is active across central and southern Indiana at this very hour, which means that warning covers dozens of counties, with heat index values climbing to 110, which means this is not just a hot afternoon. It is an official life-threatening event. The National Weather Service office in Indianapolis says this warning holds until 8 tonight, Thursday, which means residents there are looking at days, not hours, of dangerous heat exposure, which means doctors warn that car interiors can reach lethal temperatures within minutes. Overnight low temperatures are forecast to stay at or above 70 degrees across the region, which means neither your body nor the power grid gets a real chance to recover. That lack of overnight relief is exactly what turns oppressive heat into a real health emergency, which means your air conditioner is running nonstop with almost zero downtime to rest. Dale, a retired electrician up in Toledo, Ohio, has watched grid demand spike before. Dale says air conditioning demand like this pushes transformers and power lines to their limit, which means one overloaded piece of equipment could knock out power to an entire block. Honest to goodness, losing air conditioning during a heat dome like this one is never small. Up in northern New York and Vermont, a heat advisory covers the Northeast Kingdom today, which means heat index values there are forecast to run between 95 and 104. The National Weather Service office in Burlington says the worst hours fall between 1 and 5. Which means that advisory repeats itself Wednesday through Friday, not just for one afternoon. That triple-digit heat index is part of the same 26-state weather emergency we opened with. Margaret, a retired nurse down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, has treated heat stroke for decades. Margaret says the real danger is not the heat alone. It is heat mixed with humidity, which means the body's natural cooling system can shut down well before it feels unbearable. Which means her advice is simple: stay hydrated, stay shaded, and never leave a child in a car. Sandra, a retired librarian in Alexandria, Virginia, keeps a close eye on her thermometer. Sandra says Washington summers can feel brutal, but this stretch is testing everyone's patience. which means Mid-Atlantic residents are dealing with nearly the same heat as the Midwest. Good grief. Which means from Chicago to the nation's capital, nobody in that corridor catches a break. That is the heat side of today's forecast, impacting more than 100 million people. Now here's where this gets interesting, since heat domes do not exist in isolation. Right along the northern edge of that heat dome, the atmosphere is fighting back hard, which means a very different kind of danger is building over the upper Midwest today. The Storm Prediction Center has issued an enhanced risk for severe storms today and tonight. That enhanced risk covers parts of the upper Midwest and the upper Great Lakes region, which means damaging wind gusts up to 80 miles per hour are considered likely there, which means large to very large hail and a few tornadoes are also on the table. That enhanced risk zone alone covers more than 5.5 million people. A broader slight risk zone adds another 11.5 million people to that total, which means storms are expected to fire first near southern Minnesota this morning. Flat out. Activity is forecast to spread east-northeastward through the upper Midwest by afternoon. That enhanced risk population count includes Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Rochester, Minnesota. Right in the bullseye. The broader marginal risk footprint stretches all the way to New Orleans, Omaha, and Newark, New Jersey. Forecasters say around 40 knots of effective shear will help these storms stay organized, which means a mix of rotating supercells and organized clusters is likely through the afternoon. Which means these are not garden variety thunderstorms. They are organized systems built to do damage. A second round of storms is expected to fire again during the evening near that same area, which means today is not a one-and-done event. It repeats itself twice. This same storm risk is part of that 26-state weather emergency stretching coast to coast, which means wind gusts near 80 miles per hour are possible with either round today. Frank up in Springfield says he is watching this same storm risk from his front porch tonight. Out on the Central High Plains, a dry line will help fire off more storms this afternoon, which means those storms carry a real risk of severe wind gusts and large hail too. Down in the southeast, forecasters are watching for something called a wet microburst today, which means a sudden, violent downdraft can slam into the ground with very little warning. Wet microbursts are tricky, since radar can underestimate them until the wind is already on the ground. Up in the northeast, roughly 3,000 joules of energy are available for storms to use, which means damaging wind gusts are possible there too, both this afternoon and tonight. Which means that puts a wide stretch of the country under some kind of storm threat. Heads up, because tomorrow does not look any calmer across the northern plains and Midwest. A fresh storm system is forecast to take shape near South Dakota's Black Hills overnight. Earl, a rancher out in western South Dakota, keeps one eye on the sky most days. Earl says a storm building near the Black Hills is nothing new for this time of year, which means supercells are likely there first, capable of large hail and a tornado or two. Forecasters expect wind gusts of 75 miles per hour or higher with this system, which means that storm cluster could grow upscale and track for hundreds of miles. Ranchers across that corridor are already moving livestock toward lower, more sheltered ground tonight. Mid-level lapse rates near 9 degrees Celsius per kilometer will fuel rapid intensification tomorrow, which means downdrafts inside these storms can turn violent in a very short amount of time. No joke. Iowa and Wisconsin face the best chance of very large hail out of tomorrow's system, which means that slight risk zone for tomorrow covers close to 14 million people region-wide. Cities like Minneapolis, St. Paul, Milwaukee, and Des Moines all sit inside tomorrow's risk zone. A separate marginal risk stretches south too, reaching Chicago, Detroit, Memphis, Nashville, and Atlanta, which means more than 40 million additional people carry at least some severe weather chance tomorrow. Sioux Falls and Sioux City also carry a slightly higher tornado chance within that same corridor, which means a stretch from South Dakota clear through Iowa needs to stay especially weather aware tonight. Earl says folks around Sioux Falls are watching this same system right alongside him tonight. That is the storm side of this forecast. Gust up to 75 miles per hour. So here's a question for you. Which part of this forecast do you want us tracking closest? Is it the heat up north, the storms in the middle, or that strange cold out west? Comment your answer below, and we will lean into whichever region you all pick most. Speaking of that cold, this next part might be the strangest piece of today's forecast. Honest to goodness. While the east bakes and storms, the Pacific Northwest does the complete opposite. Which means one country is somehow experiencing a heat dome and a cold snap together. The Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies are stuck in an unusually cold pattern today, which means afternoon highs there run 20 to 35 degrees below average for early July. Places like Missoula, Montana, and Jackson, Wyoming are waking up to jacket weather in July, which means some campers and hikers out there are dealing with an entirely different kind of surprise, which means some mountain towns may not even reach 70 degrees this afternoon, which means that is a stunning contrast next to a heat index of 115 nearby. No two ways about it. This country rarely shows two extremes this far apart at once. Earl says ranchers out west watch fire danger the same careful way they watch for hail, which means just south of that unusual cold. The Four Corners region faces the opposite problem. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico are all locked into extremely dry conditions right now. Flagstaff, Arizona, and Durango, Colorado both sit right inside that critical fire weather zone today, which means fire weather danger there has climbed to its highest level of the season. Strong wind and painfully low humidity are exactly the ingredients wildfires need to spread fast, which means a single spark out there could turn into a serious wildfire within hours, which means that combination has crews across 4 states on edge heading into the holiday period. So that is the full picture. Heat, storms, and cold all playing out at the same time. More than half this country's states are dealing with dangerous weather at this very hour. And out west, some spots are sitting 35 degrees colder than they normally would be. Also, type the name of your city in the comments below so we can track it for you, which means 3 totally different weather stories are playing out under the same sky today. It's different when you realize one nation can bake, storm, and shiver all at once. Nobody is ready, which means these coming days will play out differently from coast to coast. If you are anywhere near that heat dome, treat today's warning like the real thing, which means you should drink fluids, stay in air conditioning when you can, and avoid midday sun, which means you check on elderly neighbors and never leave kids or pets inside a parked car, which means a car interior can turn deadly within minutes, even with the windows cracked. Heat stroke is a true emergency, so do not hesitate to call for help if needed, which means lightweight. Loose-fitting clothing and frequent shade breaks genuinely make a real difference outdoors, which means Margaret's advice tonight is simple. Hydrate before you feel thirsty, not after. If you are in that Midwest storm zone, keep away to get warnings after dark. Get to the lowest, most interior room in your home the moment a warning arrives, which means an interior bathroom or closet. Never a porch, a garage, or a parked car. Turn around, don't drown applies if you see standing water across any roadway tonight, which means just 6 inches of moving water can sweep a grown adult off their feet, which means we will keep tracking all 3 of these patterns through the coming days, which means your comments help us decide which region gets the closest coverage tomorrow. This kind of coast-to-coast contrast does not show up in the forecast very often, which means it is worth paying attention to, no matter which of these 3 you're in. Out of nowhere, weather patterns like this one can shift within just a day or 2. That same 26-state weather emergency is still unfolding as this evening rolls on, which means with the holiday period approaching, a lot of travel and outdoor plans hang in the balance, which means fireworks shows, backyard barbecues, and pool days could all be affected by the heat. Roaring back with a vengeance is honestly the best way to describe this heat dome's grip, which means do not expect a real break in this pattern before the holiday weekend arrives. Long drives to see fireworks or visit family should include extra water and a charged phone. Joining forces, a heat dome, a severe storm threat, and a strange cold snap rarely align like this. Keep your phone charged tonight, since losing power is the one thing that cuts off your warnings. Plain and simple, this stretch of the calendar is shaping up to be one of the busiest yet, which means checking the forecast daily, not just once, is your smartest move this stretch. Frank in Springfield checks on his neighbors, and Dale in Toledo keeps watching his breaker panel. Margaret in Lake Charles keeps water bottles filled, and Sandra in Alexandria keeps her radio close by. Earl out in South Dakota is watching the sky just as closely as everybody else tonight. Good Lord. One country, 3 completely different kinds of weather, all happening at once. Mark my words, this pattern is not settling down until well into the holiday period. Flat out. This is one of the more unusual coast-to-coast setups of the summer. More than half of this country, 26 states, are fighting extreme weather at this very hour. Wind gusts up to 75 miles per hour are tearing through the Midwest as we speak. And out west, some spots remain 35 degrees below average for this time of year.